Of course, it is kickoff week in the NFL, and we are so excited here in Baltimore. Our next guest is a studio analyst for NBC Sports Football Night in America, the most watched weekly studio show in all of sports. And this week, it's a big week for them as 6 playoff teams, 3 NFL primetime games across 2 continents, includes Eagles, Packers, and Brazil on Friday, exclusively on Peacock, and Rams, Lions on Sunday Night Football. But it all, of course, starts tomorrow night, the one we care about the most. Ravens, Chiefs in Kansas City. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the program Devin McCourty, who's with us on GCR. Devin, it's Glenn in Baltimore. It's great to chat with you, man. Thank you for taking the time for us.
No problem, man. It's funny, as you read all of that, I was like, I'm trying to keep up with all these time zones and everything we got going on this week.
What, I mean, are you working everything this week?
Well, I'm not live in Brazil because I'll be live in Kansas City,
Okay.
But we're in studio. We're in Kansas City and then in studio Friday and Sunday all day.
Phew, man, that's you know what though, that beats working for a living.
It sure does. It's all football. We'll take it.
No doubt, man. Devin, what do you make of the impact of what happened in the AFC Championship game going into this game? Like football players, they always try to say new year, new team, the whole deal. But it's still so crushing for so many people here in Baltimore. Are the Ravens players really capable of separating their emotions, or does it impact them, and in what way going into tomorrow night?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to like fully put into words because you're still angry about it. It's still, you want to play in the Super Bowl. You wanted an opportunity to go win a championship. Baltimore had the right pieces. They had a great team last year. So I think that always sits with you and stings. I've been on those teams where you've lost in AFC championships or even in a Super Bowl. But I think the thing as a player you start to realize is even if we come back and we beat the Chiefs opening week and we feel like we got revenge, we still didn't get what we wanted, and it's still not going to be ultimately what we want for this season. So then I think you start to settle back down. You realize it's another game. You watch the game from last year from an X and O standpoint to learn from it. But then you move on and you prepare for what you ultimately hope is the beginning of a Super Bowl run, not just beating the Chiefs on opening night.
Devin, we have made so much in our city about how the game plan was just so bizarre in the AFC Championship game. But I ask it this way. If the Ravens had run the ball more in that game, if they had a Derrick Henry, are you confident that alone would have been the difference? And do you are they the better team of these two teams? Or is that just us, feeling that way because it was so bizarre, but ultimately they would have had Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. They probably would have had the trump card, and they are really still the team to beat going into the season this year as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree at the end of what you said. I still think the Chiefs is a team to beat. I think why I love the game of football so much is everything you just said is how people want to play football on paper.
Yeah.
And it's as old as, any great coach, high school, Pop Warner, college, NFL, they'll tell you the gift and the thing about football is it's not played on paper. You got to go out there and play. So as much as we would like to say, hey, implement Derrick Henry in there, run the ball more, and the Ravens are a better team, they win, we've always watched teams play against other teams in huge games. And I think across the board, we can say, hey, this team is better. I would say last year watching Baltimore, Kansas City, going into the game, I thought it was clearly that the Baltimore Ravens was a better team, whole body of work, how they were playing. But at the end of the day, it comes down to one game, and it's who plays the best in those big moments. And that, to me, is what Kansas City is special at because of, like you mentioned, because of Patrick Mahomes, because of Travis Kelce, Andy Reid, Spagnuolo, all of those guys. That's when they're at their best moment. So that's when you have to beat them if you want to be a champion.
He is the 3-time Super Bowl champion, Devin McCourty. He's with us here on GCR. Of course, NBC and Peacock will kick off the season tomorrow night with the Chiefs and the Ravens. Pregame coverage beginning at 7 o'clock with Football Night in America on site down at Arrowhead Stadium. Devin, I bring that up in part because we almost want to convince ourselves that the difference for the Ravens can be the presence of Derrick Henry and keeping the Chiefs' offense off the field a little bit more. Is that too simplistic, Or is it truly possible that in making up the difference and acknowledging that it might not just be the Chiefs that you have to get past, like the AFC is murderer's row at this point, but is it possible that what is a good Ravens team, we know it's a good Ravens team, getting that over the hump, getting that to the next level of reaching or winning a Super Bowl, the difference could be the presence of a Derrick Henry?
Yeah, and I think that's what you hope for. That's why you go out and sign him. In 2014, we signed Darrelle Revis, and ultimately, like, not just his play, but the team and everything. He was kind of like the missing piece that year. And when we got him and we got out there on the field, it felt like that. Like, man, this is all we needed to go out there and now finish the job. And I think you look at Derrick Henry and what he's done in this league, you are hoping, all right, we pair him with Lamar Jackson. We continue to work on what we're doing in the passing game. It showed I thought it was a huge difference last year with Todd Monken and how he was able throughout the season to use the running game to implement different passes and things like that. And that was all without, for a good part, without Mark Andrews. So you get him back healthy, and now you have a new kind of, not new player, but Isaiah Likely, who's unlocked different things that he can now do because he got more playing time, with Andrews out. So I think it's everything put together, but you're hoping just having Derrick Henry, not just for the big runs he might have, but like even him as a person, a leader, a veteran, having him makes a difference like that. All those things go into, I think, taking some teams from being, one of the best teams to the best team, because you said it, the AFC, forget the AFC North is going to be a gauntlet just getting out of that and trying to win that division.
That's a fact. There's no doubt about it, with a healthy Joe Burrow in particular. How concerned are you about, again, the Ravens are trying to move 3 parts of their offensive line going into the season, and not having brought in, veteran free agents, inexperienced offensive line starters are being put into place this year, guys that are they're going to have to go out and learn on the job, right? How concerning is that to you, the idea of overhauling that much of your line with guys that certainly are thought of, but haven't done it in the NFL, and particularly going into a matchup against Chris Jones?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you sit there and you're like, well, we like what we have. And I think that is more important than experience. I played, obviously, all 13 years in New England, and, every year we would get ready for the playoffs, and Coach Belichick would get up there and he would get on his long speech, and he would tell us, I don't want to hear anybody talk about experience. That doesn't matter. I don't care how many playoff games you played in. He said every year there's some young guy who's never played in the playoffs, a rookie or a veteran who's never made it, and they have some of the biggest plays and biggest impact in the game. And I think when you have young players in the offensive line like Baltimore's going to have, if you like them as players, then ultimately you're a good football team. You want them to be playing their best ball come December, January, of hey, all of the lumps that we took early in the season and things we learned from, it was all to make you ready for these moments. And that's what you hope for when you put young players out there, is that they continue to get better. And when you need them the most at their best, the experience that they've had from the regular season and playing ultimately helps them be the best version of themselves when you need it the most.
It's one of these weird conversations, Devin, and I'm sure I'm not supposed to say this in hyping up the game for NBC. I'm not trying to be dismissive of this game, but what you just said to me is more significant than the Ravens could go down to Kansas City tomorrow night and win by 3 touchdowns, and for a day we'd feel really good in Baltimore, and then come Monday the conversation would shift back to, right, but what do they do when they face them in the playoffs, right? It's this weird vibe that exists here in Baltimore where this one almost doesn't matter. It matters in that, hey, it's the game, you're going to go play it, but that's the measurement by which we're facing the Ravens now, is you've got to prove this in the postseason. So to the same point, if it doesn't go the right way, I can't pretend like it's the end of the world if the offensive line struggles a little bit as they're trying to get things together. That ends up being the difference. It's just a weird vibe that we have here where it's a big game, it matters, it's Ravens-Chiefs, but at the same time, we just don't think it matters the way it would matter, presuming these teams are going to get together again in the postseason.
Yeah, I understand everything you just said. Being in New England and getting there and basically being behind what the first dynasty did, 3 Super Bowl titles, all of the good stuff, 3 and 4 years. you get there, and it was 10 years before we won again. But that whole time that I was a young player there, all we heard about was, well, if they lose this game, then that means their season's over. And it'd be an opening game, like, oh, this is the biggest game they got. And you continue, you buy into it a little bit as a player, and you start to be like, oh, wow, maybe we're not that good. Maybe we're never going to get to it. And you have to always kind of take a step back and realize, like, hey, we can only take this one game at a time. We got to do right. We have to take care of what's in front of us before we worry about the bigger picture. Let the coaching staff, let Harbaugh, let all those guys worry about the bigger picture. And as a player, you just go out there and do what you're supposed to do. Because that's what I've loved about Lamar Jackson, whether I sat down with him last year or watching him do other interviews and everyone wants to hype up to him and Patrick Mahomes or Kansas City, Baltimore opener. He always brings it back to his ultimate goal is to bring a championship to Baltimore. And that's what he's focused on. And I think that's the key part. You need to have that kind of vision of, we have to focus on getting to that game. And how do we do that? Get better game by game, day by day. Fix the things you need to fix and prepare for whenever you need to pull something out that you have it because of the repetitions throughout the season.
Devin McCourty, just another few minutes here on GCR as he's getting ready for a big weekend for NBC and Peacock, which, of course, kicks off with Ravens-Chiefs tomorrow night. Devin, I'm glad you brought up Lamar because you know that all of the talking head shows, right? And, like, I'm not trying to take shots. This is our business. Are almost obsessed with conversation about Lamar Jackson. It's like an economy to have takes related to Lamar Jackson. And I have found the conversation, like here, it's almost largely boring. Lamar Jackson's a damn good quarterback. The only question now is, will he lead the Ravens to a Super Bowl? And I think he will at some point. I think it's very difficult because Patrick Mahomes is uber generational, is unlike anything we've ever seen before. So this conversation is flatly boring to me, like trying to put all of this pressure on Lamar Jackson. He's a two-time NFL MVP. He is on his way to the Hall of Fame. There is no debate about the greatness of Lamar Jackson to me. The only thing is, will he get the Ravens to a Super Bowl? I think he's got a great chance, but hell, Dan Marino never won one. I can't guarantee it. I don't know what else there is to say about it at this point.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the conversation will always move, right? Some quarterbacks will be talked about how great they were, and even though they didn't win a Super Bowl, it'll be okay. You mentioned Dan Marino, like he's still viewed as one of the greatest quarterbacks to play the game. Lamar Jackson happens to be playing in an era with not only just how talented and great Patrick Mahomes is, but that whole organization has assembled something that is very productive with Spagnuolo deciding to stay and not leave and be the defensive coordinator. Andy Reid and what he's been able to do. Like that whole setup is just elite. It's awesome. So to me, I agree 100% what you said. It doesn't take away from Lamar Jackson's greatness. It does nothing to deteriorate that. He's continued to get better year by year, no matter who's been on the team, receiver-wise, the offensive line, he's continued to just grow. And when you really think about it, he's the guy who sat in that green room all the way till the last pick in the first round, where everything was, is he going to be a quarterback? Is he going to be an athlete, a receiver? And the guy has turned into one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, period.
Fact. Are those your kids trying to tell you it's time to get going today? Is that what's going on?
My youngest has orientation at his preschool. The other ones are at school.
All right. I promise it'll be the last one because I want to get a secondary question in for you. We've talked about Kyle Hamilton, you and I, before, and I know you're a fan. There's a lot of questions about the turnover from Mike McDonald to Zach Orr, and obviously the departures of some of the more predominant players. Jadeveon Clowney had such a good season, and Patrick Queen. The depth that the Ravens have in the secondary, not just game changers like Hamilton, but Brandon Stevens being such a solid number 2 cornerback when Arthur Millette comes back, and you add in a first-round pick like Wiggins. How much confidence do you have in the Ravens' defense ability to keep playing at such a high level, particularly because of how deep and how good their secondary is?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it firsthand for years. I used to hate it. It was just like no matter who left Baltimore, it was just like the culture and what they built there, it's built on having great defenses. And it just felt like, Ozzie Newsome and DeCosta, they always did a good job of bringing in the next wave of guys that you're like, how did they have Ray Lewis for all these years and then they end up with Roquan Smith? You're just like, how do they do that? So I have full belief in this defense. I think what they have the ability to do, and I think with Zach Orr, I think he's going to have the same kind of mindset of what Mike McDonald brought and being aggressive and playing to the strengths of the player. So I'm anxious to see how they continue to build on what they do in the secondary. Obviously, that's what I love to watch. But I looked at what Kyle Hamilton did last year because of Geno Stone being there. He was able to play kind of different roles of safety / nickel / like linebacker a little bit. And I'm anxious to see just what they decide to do if Eddie Jackson becomes a part of the 3 safety set, or do they play their corners more. Nate Wiggins was I felt he was the top corner coming out of the draft this year. And so far, he has shown that. So I love watching the defense. One of my best friends is Kyle Van Noy, and I think he's one of those guys that no matter what team he's on, no one ever can count it as a big signing or, what he can do. But it always seems like when he gets on a team, he has the ability to make big plays, to have big years, to help a defense kind of get over the edge and do some of the things they want to do. And last year he had one of his best years statistically, but I think ultimately what he's able to do and the versatility he brings just adds even more to what they have. But obviously Matabike in the middle, and like I mentioned before, Roquan Smith.
What a great dude Kyle Van Noy is too, man. You are just a 10 of a human being, man. We really enjoyed having him. At Devin McCourty is how you follow him on Twitter. And again, NBC, he's going to be as much a part of your life as your own kids are over the course of the next few days. Starting tomorrow night, Ravens, Chiefs, NBC and Peacock. Devin, enjoy orientation. Always appreciate you, man. Thank you for taking the time for us this morning.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.